Hi viewers, my name's Kara, and this is number 2 in my LGBTQ Pagans series it's turning into. But this one is going to be a lot more just like a discussion, because it's not as much my opinion of one question as it is a bunch of good points that this person brought up, and then my responses to those things, and some further thought type things, so you can really have a discussion about it. Also, before we get into it, before anyone asks, this tapestry behind me is the one that you've probably seen in some previous videos, and like the one that used to be hanging on my wall in my dorm room, it was stock from the previous owner of the gift shop that my mom used to have, so it's kind of been handed down to me. I don't know exactly where it came from, but you can find things like it from Gypsy Rose. They have a website, you can go and look there, and I know they have lots of tapestries like it, if not this exact thing. I haven't checked recently, so I don't know. Now that that's out of the way, I'm just going to run you through a bunch of things that the questioner asked me or said to me, and then I'll move on to my responses. So there were a lot of things to go through, and I do have my computer here, so I will be reading to you a lot of the time. Firstly, this person has been studying Wicca for several years now, and they've just now kind of come up to this roadblock of ideas. So the first thing, in Wicca there's a lot of emphasis on the god and goddess as being very heteronormative. That is, as the god is a man and he represents masculinity and he is straight, and the goddess being the same way but feminine/woman/female. The questioner is genderqueer and is attracted to their own biological sex. I'm keeping the questioner totally anonymous, but if that explanation confused you, that would be like if I were to identify as genderqueer, but I am biologically female and I'm attracted to biological females. So this person is attracted to their same actual sex, but they identify personally as genderqueer, and because of that they have a hard time relating to the god and goddess. And that's kind of where this whole thing comes from. Going on to more quotes, I know that the heteronormative side is just that, one side of them, and that the goddess isn't actually biologically female, even though we use the human reproductive man/woman thing as a symbol, and indeed it is a very powerful one. Nobody seems to talk about the masculine side of the goddess or the feminine side of the god, maybe a little. There is always in Wicca a total, almost glorification of cissexuality and gender normativity. For those of you who don't know what cissexuality is, it's actually something that I just learned about a month ago. Cissexuality, or being cisgendered, is the word for if you identify with the gender that is attributed to your biological sex. I am cisgendered because I am biologically female and I identify as a female. So they're saying that in Wicca there's this focus on being cisgendered because the god is male and masculine and the goddess is female and feminine. Moving on, quotes, I know there is a purpose for this. Wicca creates a whole new model, a whole new dynamic for heterosexuals, a new healthy and positive way for men and women to love. That's actually something I never even thought of before. Here's the main question, but where are my queer people? Where are the queer gods and goddesses and divine androgynes? Androgynes? Sorry. I don't know how to pronounce that form of the word. Androgynous deities. But we don't talk about them. They're not included in our narratives. The Wheel of the Year is at the core of my practice, but it can make me feel very isolated sometimes. We put so much attention to the male mysteries and the female mysteries, but what about the lesbian mysteries, the androgynous mysteries, the gay mysteries, the transgendered mysteries, the butch lesbian mysteries? Why do you think we don't still have LGBTQIA narratives in Wicca? Is Wicca inherently cis-sexist and non-inclusive to LGBTQIA? Does it have to be this way? How is Wicca going to adapt to a world of changing gender dynamics and an evolving view of masculinity and femininity? Will Wicca fall behind or pave a glorious new future for celebrating all of humanity and our diverse sexual natures? If I could read all of these words, it could really help right now. So that was a lot of questions to go through. Now I'm going to take you through my responses. I was communicating via message with this person. So I'm just going to read you what my initial responses were instead of really coming up with anything new. Even though I have done a little bit more reading since this conversation, I will give you some links and suggestions for where to look at the end of this. But right now I'm just going to read to you what I wrote then, just to kind of bring you into the discussion. So the first thing I said was that they brought this up eventually, that some sources do maybe a little talk about the feminine side of the god and the masculine side of the goddess. There are actually a lot of sources that do say, even though we think of the god as representing masculinity, he also has feminine aspects, vice versa for the goddess. That is not something that I've ever seen remain totally hidden. I've often seen that put right out there in the front, like even though we're talking about them this way, they definitely have other aspects. I've also read a few sources that clarify that they purposely say masculine and feminine instead of male and female, because they are attempting to recognize that those things don't go immediately with biological sex or even with gender. Masculine does not mean males, and feminine does not mean females. They're just terms that we use to talk about types of energy. And I know I've read several sources that use this kind of terminology for this reason, but the one that I can think of most readily right now is The Spiral Dance by Starhawk, because I just finished reading it a short while ago. You know, originally when this book was written, she used a lot of language of male energy and female energy, meaning masculine and feminine, and then this is the special 20th anniversary edition, and she's got notes for each anniversary. In the notes and edits, she talks a lot about how as her path progressed, she stopped using the terms male energy and female energy, and really doesn't think of it as a sex or gendered polarity anymore, especially being from California, San Francisco, huge LGBT, etc. community. So it's really come out even more so in her path that we can't think of it in terms of male and female. So that is the number one source that I can think of right now that definitely talks about not saying male and female, and when we say masculine and feminine, we're only talking about that type of energy. There are other sources, but that's just the first one that comes to mind because I just read it. As for the god and goddess being straight, yes, in the Wheel of the Year they do mate together, but to me it never stuck out as because they were heterosexual, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone flat out say that they are. And then I said in my message that would lead to a lot of, well, our gods are straight, so we must be too, which is obviously not true because paganism is very accepting of alternate sexualities, which is why I'm doing this series in the first place. Obviously, not all individual groups and not all individuals are necessarily accepting of other sexualities, but the kinds of beliefs in general are kind of conducive to that. I go on to say that I'm bisexual, and maybe because of that, I automatically see those qualities in my gods. I don't know any, or I didn't know before this, any stories of the gods specifically being gay, but a lot of people do think of them as bisexual if any kind of label of sexuality can be put on them. But I admit, maybe because that's how I see the world, that's how I see my gods as well, but I always have dreams and meditations of them as being gender fluid, definitely, but definitely not as straight. And I think this is the first time I ever said it in words. When I messaged this person back, I said that I identify with the goddess as much as a lover as I do a mother figure, if not more so. Oftentimes I also think of the goddess as a sister or as a lover, any number of things of that nature, and the god the same way. To me, the mating aspect in the Wheel of the Year isn't literal. It's not as much about a man and a woman as it is about opposite forces coming together to create balance. Opposite, not opposing, is also something that I took from Starhawk, from this book. She talks about that a lot. The forces, the energies that we're talking about are opposite. They are the opposite of each other, and they come together complementarily to create a balance, but they are not opposing. They are not at war with each other. So opposite, not opposing. Love that. Thanks, Starhawk. Moving on, why aren't there any stories? I don't actually know why, but people started telling stories in the first place, so if we want those stories, why don't we just start telling them? In one of the links that I'll share in a minute, you'll see there are actually already gay-themed mythologies that just kind of don't get told as being that way because we don't think of the gods as having an actual sexuality the way people do. But as far as I'm concerned, if that's what we want to hear more of, why don't we just tell more of those stories and let's make it balanced? People tell stories. That's what we can do. And then I mentioned to this person the video that I did last time about heterosexual male pagans and how they feel about it. The other person asked me to talk about why there are so many gay pagans because straight males feel excluded due to the emphasis on the feminine. Biological females, homosexual or heterosexual, are included because they are female. Gay men are included as having feminine qualities, stereotypically. I'm not sure about trans men. But then heterosexual males are kind of excluded as being thought to not be pagan, so that's kind of what the last thing was about. Essentially, I'm not sure why we don't have these stories. Like I said, I'm afraid that I didn't notice that they're kind of heteronormative because I personally recognize them as symbolic, not as literal positives for heterosexuality. So I think because of the way I see it, I just know that in my mind that's not what it means, so it kind of went right over my head that some people might see that as being really exclusive. Just because I see it as being inclusive and symbolic doesn't mean that there aren't pagans out there who, number one, believe it means hetero is the way to go, or two, will feel really left out if they don't fit that mold. So it's worth addressing. I don't know why we don't have more stories like this, but I see no reason why we can't change it ourselves. No, it certainly does not have to be this way. why. They asked if it had to be this way. No, I don't think it does. And no, I don't think that Wicca inherently excludes LGBTQ, etc. people. Some groups definitely do. That's a personal choice of theirs. But I don't think Wicca in itself, as a general belief system, excludes us. I don't think it does. Every person, regardless of who they love, embodies yin and yang. Every person is masculine and feminine in varying degrees, which of course is what yin and yang are, but yin and yang don't have as much of that feel of, oh, you mean male and female, as when you say masculine and feminine. So I think maybe we could get away with changing the gender focus by using different words entirely, or by stating right up front, as some authors do, I am saying masculine and feminine, not male and female. We could use words that aren't as gender triggered when talking about these energies that really don't have to do with a specific sex. The next reply from the questioner said that they do think a distinction between masculinity and femininity as qualities, man and woman as genders, which encompass many roles and varying degrees of masculinity and femininity, and biological sex, male, female, intersex, as three distinct things would be helpful a lot in Wicca. I think sometimes we automatically equate male equals man equals masculine and female equals woman equals feminine, when this isn't the reality for many individuals. So kind of the main conclusion that the questioner and I came up with is that we could really benefit from using different words to make it clear that we're not talking about men and women, we're talking about energies. So now, moving on to the last point. I know this is a long video. The questioner mentioned that there are queer gods and androgynous gods, and I actually didn't know of any specifically because I had always heard, like, you know, the gods don't really have sexuality in that way that we think about it. But I did a very basic Google search and I found some links that you might be interested in, and they will be below in the description. And these are all just from the first page of Google results, so I'm sure you could find a ton more. But there is a Witchvox article by Christopher Penczak on gods with homosexual associations. There is a Yahoo Answers thread, I know we love Yahoo Answers, where someone asked if there were any gods that were like the patron of homosexuals and things like that, and a lot of answers on there had different ideas for what gods are either seen as gay or seen as patrons or protectors of gays, so that is down there. An article on pathos.com, you can read the whole thing. It's a couple pages. The link goes to the second page because that's where they start talking about gay gods. It addressed the fact that a lot of people say, well, the gods don't have sexuality the way that humans do. And the article asks, if that is the case, why is the great right male and female? If they don't have to be straight or whatever, like if that's not the important thing, why is it male and female? And my answer to that is because it's the coupling of opposite energies that's really important, which we represent as male and female because those are obviously opposite. But to me, it's just symbolic. So if you wanted to, I see no reason why you couldn't have symbolism like that using two male deities or two female deities that each represent opposite forces of each other, because we know that every deity has a little bit of both. And so I think if you pick two same-sex deities that have opposite characteristics, they represent balance just as much as a male and a female would. To me, it's just what represents opposite forces coming together and creating harmony and balance. So that's how I see it. It's not the end-all be-all, that's just me, but that's how I see it, and that is below. And then there's also an article from the Wellhead website, which is Alexandrian Wicca, and they talk about gay witchcraft as well. So there's just 4 links for you, and like I said, I'm sure you can find a lot more because that was just from the first page, and I think all I did is search gay pagans. So you could get a lot fancier and more advanced with your search and find a lot more specific things as well. This video is probably really long. I apologize for that. I'm gonna have a lot of fun editing it now. I just wanted to kind of get all of those thoughts out there for you so you could just all be aware that this is a discussion I was having and think about it a little bit and provide your own input. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time with another question that I am much less prepared to talk about. It may not be the next video on this channel because I'm gonna take some time until I'm ready to say something about it, but yeah, look forward to that. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for being here. Blessed be, and goodbye.